The massive crystalline spaceship materializes above New York City, its sudden appearance shattering the calm of a typical Tuesday morning. Princess Astra of the Nigean Empire has arrived on Earth to claim a human male as her pet. Panic erupts in the streets as the alien vessel hovers, its translucent surface refracting sunlight in dazzling patterns. Global communications falter, cell phones go dead, and television broadcasts dissolve into static. Military jets scramble, their pilots receiving frantic orders to intercept the unknown craft. Inside the United Nations General Assembly, world leaders gather for an emergency session. The air crackles with tension as diplomats argue in hushed tones, their faces pale with fear. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupts in the center of the room. As the luminescence fades, Princess Astra stands before them. She's a vision of otherworldly beauty. Her iridescent skin shimmers, and her eyes shift colors like a kaleidoscope. The assembled dignitaries gasp, some recoiling in fear, others leaning forward in fascination. Astra's voice rings out, clear and commanding. "I am Princess Astra of the Nigean Empire. I have come to claim a human male as my pet." Shocked murmurs ripple through the assembly. The alien princess continues, explaining that Nigean royalty traditionally selects pets from newly discovered species as a symbol of dominance and cultural exchange. Her words fall like hammer blows. If her demand isn't met within 24 hours, the Nigean Empire will consider it an act of war and retaliate against Earth. As the UN erupts into chaos, the scene shifts to Seattle. Eric Reed, a 28-year-old aerospace engineer, sits in his living room, eyes glued to the television. He watches the events unfold, unaware that he's about to become the center of this interstellar crisis. Back in New York, heated debates rage. Some nations advocate compliance to avoid conflict, while others argue for resistance. The air in the assembly hall grows thick with tension and fear. In orbit aboard her crystalline ship, Princess Astra activates advanced Nigean technology. A blue light envelops the Earth as she scans the planet's population, searching for a human male who meets her specific genetic and physical criteria. The scan zeroes in on Seattle, identifying Eric as the ideal candidate. Astra's lips curve into a smile as she dispatches a team of Nigean soldiers to capture him. Simultaneously, in a secure bunker beneath Washington, D.C., United States intelligence officers detect the alien scan. They track its focus to Seattle and quickly identify Eric as the target. Recognizing him as a potential bargaining chip in the tense negotiations with the aliens, they mobilize a special forces team to intercept and protect him. As both alien and human forces converge on Seattle, Eric remains oblivious. He continues to watch the news, unaware that he has become the most sought-after man on the planet. The fate of humanity hangs in the balance, and the clock is ticking. As Eric Reed continued to watch the unfolding crisis on his television, a sharp buzz from his phone broke his concentration. He glanced at the screen, seeing his best friend Mark Thompson's name flashing urgently. "Eric, you need to get out of there now." Mark's voice crackled with almost unchecked panic. "There's something weird going on in the neighborhood. Military vehicles, strange lights. It's like a war zone out here." Before Eric could fully process Mark's warning, the sound of boots pounding on the stairs outside his apartment door jolted him into action. Heart racing, he peered through the peephole, his breath catching at the sight of heavily armed soldiers converging on his floor. Adrenaline surging, Eric bolted for the fire escape. As he clambered down the metal stairs, the cool Seattle air bit at his skin. The usually quiet street below had transformed into a scene of awe-inspiring chaos. U.S. Special Forces vehicles blocked one end, while strange, shimmering craft hovered at the other. Between them stood two groups locked in a tense standoff, human soldiers with their weapons trained on tall, iridescent figures, wielding what could only be described as alien technology. Eric's mind reeled as he connected the dots. Somehow he had become the center of this interstellar crisis. Ducking into the shadows, he edged along the building's wall, desperately seeking an escape route. A flash of movement caught his eye. An alien figure, a Nigean scout, had separated from the main group and was methodically sweeping the area. Its kaleidoscopic eyes scanned the surroundings, advanced sensors probing for any sign of human life. Trapped between the scout and the standoff, Eric's engineering mind kicked into overdrive. His eyes darted around, taking stock of his surroundings. A discarded smartphone lay on the ground, its screen cracked but still functional. Next to a dumpster, he spotted an old microwave, likely left out for large item pickup. An idea formed. With trembling hands, Eric grabbed the devices and ducked behind the dumpster. Working feverishly, he dismantled the microwave, repurposing its magnetron and capacitor. He connected these to the smartphone's battery, creating a crude but potentially effective electromagnetic pulse generator. The Nigean scout's footsteps grew closer. Eric held his breath, finger hovering over the smartphone's screen. As the alien rounded the corner, Eric activated his makeshift device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a sharp crack. The scout's advanced equipment sputtered and died, its lights flickering out. Taking advantage of the alien's momentary disorientation, Eric slipped past, ducking into a nearby alley. Heart pounding, he navigated the back streets of Seattle, his mind racing to formulate a plan. The city he knew so well had become an alien landscape, filled with danger at every turn. As sirens wailed in the distance, Eric spotted a familiar grate in the ground, an entrance to Seattle's underground tunnel system. Without hesitation, he pried open the grate and lowered himself into the darkness below. The damp, musty air of the tunnels enveloped him as he moved swiftly through the labyrinth beneath the city. Above ground, news of Eric's escape spread quickly. In her crystalline ship, Princess Astra received the report with a mixture of frustration and intrigue. This human had evaded her best scouts, showcasing a level of ingenuity she hadn't expected. A slow smile spread across her face. "Prepare my personal transport," she commanded, her kaleidoscopic eyes gleaming with excitement. "I will join the search myself." Moments later, Seattle's sky erupted in a dazzling display of light as Astra's ship descended. Citizens stopped in their tracks, mouths agape as the alien princess emerged. Her iridescent form seemed to shimmer and shift in the fading daylight, captivating and terrifying onlookers in equal measure. Meanwhile, in a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, Operation Stardust roared to life. Monitors flickered with satellite imagery and data streams as analysts worked feverishly to track Eric's movements. "We need to get to him before the Nigeans do," barked General Harrison, his weathered face creased with concern. "Where's Dr. Wells?" As if on cue, Dr. Samantha Wells strode into the room, her lab coat billowing behind her. "I'm here, General. What's our play?" "Your mission is to make contact with Reed," Harrison explained, his voice grave. "Convince him to surrender to us voluntarily. We need him as a bargaining chip if we're going to have any chance of resolving this diplomatically." Samantha nodded, her mind already racing through potential scenarios. "I'll need a team and transport to Seattle immediately." As preparations for Dr. Wells's mission got underway, Eric continued his journey through Seattle's underground. The weight of his situation pressed down on him with each step. He was no longer just Eric Reed, aerospace engineer. He had become a linchpin in a cosmic drama, his actions potentially shaping the future of human-alien relations. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Eric finally emerged from the tunnels, finding himself in an abandoned warehouse district. The setting sun cast long shadows across the empty streets as he searched for a place to catch his breath and gather his thoughts. Slipping into a dilapidated warehouse, Eric sank to the floor, his back against a cold concrete wall. The events of the day swirled in his mind: the alien princess, the military pursuit, his desperate escape. As the last light of day faded, Eric closed his eyes, grappling with the monumental choice that lay before him. Unbeknownst to Eric, to the Nigeans, and to the human military forces converging on Seattle, another player was about to enter the game. High above Earth's atmosphere, a sleek ship of unknown design approached, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to both human and Nigean sensors. The Galactic Council's envoy had arrived, adding yet another layer to the complex interstellar scenario unfolding on Earth. As night fell over Seattle, the city held its breath. In the quiet of his warehouse refuge, Eric Reed pondered his next move, unaware that his decisions in the coming hours would ripple across the galaxy, forever altering the course of human history. As the first light of dawn crept over Seattle's skyline, Eric stirred from his fitful sleep in the abandoned warehouse. The events of the previous day crashed over him anew, and he realized with a jolt that he couldn't remain hidden forever. His mind raced, considering his options, when a face flashed in his memory. Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, his colleague and friend at the University of Washington. If anyone could help him make sense of this interstellar crisis, it was Amelia. Her expertise in extraterrestrial communication theories might be the key to navigating this unprecedented situation. Decision made, Eric cautiously peered out of a grimy window, scanning the street for any signs of alien or military presence. Seeing the coast was clear, he slipped out of the warehouse, his heart pounding with every step. The city was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous day. As he made his way through the empty streets, Eric's engineering mind kicked into overdrive. He ducked into an alley, grabbing discarded electronics from a dumpster. With deft hands, he cobbled together a crude signal jammer, hoping it would be enough to disrupt any nearby surveillance systems. Next, he fashioned a makeshift disguise using abandoned clothes and a discarded wig from a costume shop's trash. Eric's journey across the city was a nerve-wracking game of cat and mouse. He darted from shadow to shadow, using his improvised tech to create distractions and false signals. At one point, he narrowly avoided a patrol of Nigerian soldiers, their iridescent forms shimmering as they passed mere feet from his hiding spot behind a parked car. As he neared the university campus, Eric's spirits lifted. He was so close to reaching Amelia, to finding some answers in this madness. But as he rounded the corner onto the main quad, his heart sank. Dr. Samantha Wells stood before him, flanked by two stern-faced military personnel. Her expression was a mix of relief and urgency as she quickly closed the distance between them. "Eric Reed," she said, her voice low and intense. "I'm Dr. Samantha Wells, xenobiologist with Operation Stardust. We've been looking for you." Eric tensed, ready to bolt, but Dr. Wells raised her hands in a placating gesture. "Please, hear me out. The situation is more complex than you know." She quickly explained the government's plan to use him as a diplomatic asset, emphasizing the potential to avoid a catastrophic war. Eric listened, his mind turning as he weighed his personal freedom against the fate of the entire planet. Before he could respond, a brilliant flash of light erupted behind them. Eric squinted against the glare, his jaw dropping as he beheld the figure that emerged. Princess Astra stood before them, her alien beauty even more striking in person than it had been on the news broadcast. Her kaleidoscopic eyes fixed on Eric, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "At last," she said, her voice melodious and otherworldly, "the elusive human reveals himself." Eric froze, caught between Dr. Wells and the alien princess. But to everyone's surprise, Astra made no move to seize him. Instead, she cocked her head, studying Eric with obvious curiosity. "You've led us on quite a chase," Astra continued, taking a step closer. "I find myself intrigued by your ingenuity. Tell me, Eric Reed, how did you manage to evade my best scouts?" The tension in the air was palpable, as Eric, Dr. Wells, and the approaching U.S. forces watched Astra, unsure of her intentions. Eric swallowed hard, then found his voice. "Your Highness," he began, his mind racing to formulate a plan. "I propose a compromise." Astra's eyebrows rose, her kaleidoscopic eyes shimmering with interest. Eric took a deep breath and continued, "I will voluntarily go with you as your pet." The word felt strange on his tongue. "But only if you agree to engage in peaceful negotiations with Earth's leaders and withdraw your threat of war." A hush fell over the quad as everyone held their breath, waiting for Astra's response. The princess regarded Eric for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's amazement, she laughed, a sound like tinkling crystals. "You continue to surprise me, Eric Reed," she said, a new respect evident in her tone. "Very well, I accept your terms." The gathered humans exchanged shocked glances as Astra extended her hand to Eric. With a final look at Dr. Wells, who nodded almost imperceptibly, Eric stepped forward and took the alien princess's hand. As news of this unexpected turn of events spread, the campus erupted into a flurry of activity. Government officials hurried to adjust their strategies, while journalists clamored for a statement. Through it all, Eric stood at the center of the storm, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of his decision. Dr. Wells approached him, her face a mix of admiration and concern. "Eric, are you sure about this?" He nodded, his perseverance strengthening. "It's the best chance we have for peace. I have to try." As preparations began for Eric's departure, he found himself face to face with Princess Astra once more. The alien royal regarded him with a complex expression, one that hinted at emotions beyond her initial desire for a pet. "You have shown great courage, Eric Reed," she said softly. "Perhaps there is more to learn from your species than I first thought." As they stood there, human and alien on the brink of an unprecedented journey, a new light suddenly illuminated the sky. A sleek ship of unknown design decloaked above them, its presence sending waves of awe through the gathered crowd. A voice boomed from the ship, resonating with authority. "This is the envoy of the Galactic Council. We are here to oversee the negotiations between Earth and the Nigean Empire." Eric and Astra exchanged a glance, both realizing that their agreement had just become part of a much larger cosmic dance. As they prepared to board Astra's ship, the weight of their decisions hung in the air, the future of human-alien relations balanced on a knife's edge. The world watched, hearts pounding, as Eric Reed took his first steps towards an unknown future among the stars. The adventure was only beginning. The world watched, hearts pounding, as Eric Reed took his first steps towards an unknown future among the stars. The adventure was only beginning as he and Princess Astra approached her crystalline ship, its iridescent surface shimmering in the fading light of day. As they neared the vessel, a beam of soft blue light enveloped them, gently lifting them off the ground. Eric's stomach lurched as they ascended, the Seattle skyline shrinking beneath their feet. He glanced at Astra, her alien features a mix of triumph and curiosity. They passed through an opening that appeared and disappeared like a liquid membrane, stepping into a cavernous hangar bay. Eric's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the Nigean flagship's interior. Organic curves melded seamlessly with technological marvels beyond his comprehension. Bioluminescent panels pulsed with energy, casting a warm glow over the alien crew bustling about their duties. "Welcome aboard, Eric Reed," Astra said, her melodious voice tinged with a note of pride. "This will be your new home." As they moved through the ship's corridors, Eric noticed the curious glances from the all-female crew. Some eyed him with undisguised interest, while others regarded him with what seemed like disdain. He felt a growing unease, realizing how out of place he truly was. Astra led him to her private quarters, a spacious chamber that took Eric's breath away. One wall was entirely transparent, offering a panoramic view of Earth slowly rotating below. Alien artifacts adorned the room, their purposes as mysterious as they were beautiful. "I hope these accommodations will suffice," Astra said, gesturing around the room. "You'll find everything you need here." Eric nodded, still processing the rapid change in his circumstances. "Thank you, Your Highness. But I have to ask, what exactly is my role here? What does being your pet entail?" Astra's kaleidoscopic eyes shimmered as she regarded him. "In Nigean society, males serve as subservient partners to females. As my pet, you'll be expected to learn our ways and assist me in my duties." The implications of her words hit Eric like a physical blow. He had agreed to this arrangement to prevent a war, but the reality of his position was only now sinking in. Before he could respond, a chime sounded, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. "Princess Astra," a stern voice announced, "we've detected an approaching vessel of unknown origin." Astra's demeanor shifted instantly from regal host to commanding officer. "Initiate defensive protocols. I'm on my way to the bridge." As she turned to leave, the ship suddenly lurched. The artificial gravity flickered, and for a moment Eric found himself weightless. Acting on instinct, he reached out and caught Astra's arm, stabilizing her as they floated. Their eyes met, and Eric felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. Astra's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of something more than curiosity passing across her features. Then, as quickly as it had failed, the gravity returned, and they found their feet once more. "Thank you," Astra said, her voice softer than before. "Perhaps there's more to you than I initially thought, Eric Reed." With that, she swept out of the room, leaving Eric alone with his thoughts and the breathtaking view of his home planet. As he watched the Earth spin slowly beneath him, he couldn't help but wonder what challenges lay ahead and how his actions would shape the future of human-alien relations. On the bridge, Astra received a report from her communications officer. "Your Highness, the approaching vessel identifies itself as an envoy from the Galactic Council. They're requesting permission to dock." Astra's brow furrowed. The Galactic Council's involvement complicated matters significantly. She knew their presence could jeopardize her plans for Earth, but refusing them would be a diplomatic nightmare. "Grant them permission," she commanded, "and summon Eric Reed to the docking bay. It's time to see how our new human guest handles interstellar politics." As Eric made his way through the ship's winding corridors, escorted by a pair of Nigerian guards, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a situation far more complex than he had imagined. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy, hung in the balance, and he was at the center of it all. The docking bay doors hissed open, revealing a sleek silver vessel unlike anything Eric had ever seen. As the airlock cycled, he steeled himself for whatever alien entity might emerge. Standing beside Princess Astra, he felt both out of place and strangely empowered. The airlock opened, and a tall, imposing figure stepped out. Captain Zara of the Galactic Council stood before them, her stern gaze sweeping over the assembled Nigerians before settling on Eric. "So?" Zara said, her voice carrying a weight of authority that made even Astra stand straighter. "This is the human who has caused such a stir in our corner of the galaxy." Eric swallowed hard, acutely aware that his next words could shape the course of history. As he opened his mouth to speak, he silently hoped that his human ingenuity would be enough to navigate the complex web of interstellar diplomacy that lay before him. Eric took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and stepped forward to address Captain Zara. "Captain," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his stomach, "I'm Eric Reed. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to our solar system." Zara's piercing gaze softened slightly, a hint of approval flickering across her features. "Well spoken, Eric Reed. Your actions have rippled across the galaxy, drawing the attention of the Galactic Council. We are here to ensure that the negotiations between Earth and the Nigerian Empire proceed fairly and peacefully." Astra stepped forward, her regal bearing on full display. "The Nigerian Empire welcomes the Council's oversight, Captain Zara. We have already begun working towards a peaceful resolution with the humans." As the group moved from the docking bay to a more suitable meeting area, Eric found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Nigerian crew members bustled about, preparing for the upcoming negotiations, while Captain Zara's team set up their own equipment, filling the air with a cacophony of alien languages and the hum of advanced technology. In the days that followed, Eric worked closely with Princess Astra, focusing on selecting Earth-based projects that could benefit from Nigerian technology. They spent long hours poring over data, discussing the most pressing issues facing humanity. "What about this?" Eric asked, pointing to a holographic display of Earth's major cities. "New York City has been struggling with its energy infrastructure for decades. If we could implement a clean energy solution there, it would make a huge impact." Astra's kaleidoscopic eyes shimmered as she considered the proposal. "An excellent choice, Eric. Not only would it demonstrate the practical applications of our technology, but it would also show our commitment to improving life on Earth." As they continued their discussions, Eric couldn't help but notice the way Astra's demeanor had shifted. The haughty princess who had first sought him as a pet was gradually being replaced by a passionate and intelligent leader, genuinely invested in the success of their joint venture. Their second project focused on an advanced water purification system for regions suffering from drought. As they worked side by side, Eric found himself drawn to Astra's quick mind and growing understanding of human needs. However, not everyone aboard the Nigerian flagship shared their enthusiasm for cooperation. Commander Lysera, leader of a hardline Nigerian faction, watched the proceedings with barely concealed disdain. In the privacy of her quarters, she opened a secure communication channel to Earth. "Is everything in place?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. A grainy hologram of a human face appeared before her. "Yes, Commander. Our people are ready to act on your signal." Lysara's lips curled into a cold smile. Excellent. The demonstration will provide the perfect opportunity to show both humans and Nigeans the folly of this so-called peace. As the day of the demonstration approached, tensions on Earth reached a fever pitch. President Marcus Steele faced mounting pressure from all sides. In a bold move, he announced his intention to attend the demonstration personally, a decision that sent shockwaves through the global political landscape. Aboard the Nigean ship, Eric and Astra's working relationship continued to evolve. Late one night, as they finalized the details of their presentation, Eric noticed Astra staring at him with an unreadable expression. "Is everything all right, Your Highness?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Astra blinked as if coming out of a trance. "Yes, I was just thinking about how much has changed since we first met. You continue to surprise me, Eric Reed." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Eric felt his heart rate quicken, acutely aware of Astra's alien beauty and the intelligence that shone in her kaleidoscopic eyes. The moment was broken by a chime from the ship's communication system. Captain Zara's voice filled the room. "Princess Astra, Eric Reed, please report to the bridge. We have new information regarding the demonstration security protocols." As they made their way to the bridge, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was about to unfold. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and he was walking a tightrope between them, with forces on both sides working to tip the scales. The day of the demonstration dawned clear and bright over New York City. Central Park had been transformed into a high-tech wonderland, with Nigean and human technologies seamlessly integrated to create a glimpse of a possible shared future. As Eric and Astra descended from their ship in a smaller craft, the roar of the crowd below was deafening. Billions around the world watched as the human and the alien princess stepped onto the stage, ready to usher in a new era of cooperation. Eric took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of faces before him, and began to speak. "People of Earth, today we stand on the brink of a new chapter in human history. But even as hope blossomed in the hearts of many, darker forces were moving into position, ready to shatter the fragile peace before it could take root." Root. As Eric opened his mouth to continue his speech, a blinding flash of light erupted from the sky, followed by a deafening boom that sent shockwaves through the crowd. Panic ensued as people scrambled for cover, their screams drowning out the sound of emergency sirens. Eric felt a firm grip on his arm as Astra pulled him towards their craft. "We need to get back to the ship now!" she shouted over the chaos. As they raced back to the Nigean flagship, Eric's mind reeled with questions. What had happened? Was this part of Commander Lysara's plan? The moment they stepped onto the bridge, they were met with a scene of utter confusion. Nigean crew members rushed about, their usual composure shattered by the unfolding crisis. "Report!" Astra commanded, her voice cutting through the din. Before anyone could respond, the ship's main view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Captain Zara. "Princess Astra," she began, her tone grave, "I bring news from the Galactic Council. Earth has been declared a protected planet, effective immediately." Eric felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by a wave of uncertainty. He glanced at Astra, whose expression had hardened into an unreadable mask. "The Council cites the potential for exploitation of a less advanced species," Zara continued. "This declaration nullifies any prior agreements between the Nigean Empire and Earth, including—" She paused, her eyes flicking to Eric. "Your claim on the human as a pet." The bridge fell silent, the weight of Zara's words hanging heavily in the air. Eric's mind raced, trying to process the implications of this new development. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. A young Nigean officer's voice cut through the noise. "Your Highness, we're detecting unauthorized access to the ship's weapon systems." Before Astra could respond, the main doors to the bridge slid open with a hiss. Commander Lysara strode in, flanked by a group of armed Nigean soldiers. "I'm afraid I must relieve you of command, Princess," she announced, her voice dripping with false regret. Astra's eyes narrowed. "On what grounds, Commander?" "On the grounds that you've become too soft, too willing to bend to the whims of lesser species and meddling councils," Lysara spat. She raised her hand, and her soldiers leveled their weapons at Astra and Eric. "Eric, run!" Astra shouted, pushing him towards a side exit. They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of energy blasts echoing behind them. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with Captain Zara and her team of Galactic Council diplomats. "This way," Zara urged, ushering them into Astra's private quarters. Once inside, Eric's engineering instincts took over. He moved to a control panel near the door, his fingers flying over the alien interface. "I think I can access the ship's internal communications from here," he muttered, more to himself than the others. Astra watched him work, a mix of admiration and concern in her eyes. "Even if you can, what good will it do? Lysara controls the bridge." "Information is power," Eric replied, not looking up from his task. "If we can monitor their communications, we might find a way to stop them." As if on cue, Lysara's voice crackled through the room's speakers. "Attention all crew, the Galactic Council has overstepped its bounds. We will not allow them to dictate the fate of our empire. Prepare for combat operations against Earth. It's time we showed these humans the true might of the Nigean Empire." Eric's blood ran cold. He turned to Astra, seeing his own horror reflected in her kaleidoscopic eyes. "We can't let this happen," Eric said, his voice filled with persistence. "There has to be a way to stop her." Astra nodded, her regal bearing returning as she faced this new challenge. "You're right. We need a plan." Captain Zara stepped forward, her stern expression softening slightly. "The Council has dispatched reinforcements, but they won't arrive in time to prevent an attack on Earth. Whatever we do, we must act quickly." Eric's mind raced, piecing together everything he had learned about Nigean technology during his time on the ship. An idea began to form, dangerous and desperate, but possibly their only hope. "The teleportation system," he said, looking at Astra. "If we can get to the bridge, we might be able to stop Lysara before she can launch an attack." Astra's eyes widened as she grasped his plan. "It's risky, but it might work. The system wasn't designed for internal ship transport, but with some modifications—" "I can make those modifications," Eric assured her, already moving towards the room's central console. As Eric worked, his fingers dancing across the alien interface with growing confidence, Astra turned to Captain Zara. "We'll need a distraction to draw Lysara's attention away from the bridge." Zara nodded grimly. "My team and I can create that distraction. Just give us the signal when you're ready to move." The room buzzed with tension as Eric made the final adjustments to the teleportation system. He looked up at Astra, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent understanding. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. "It's ready," Eric announced, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Astra moved to stand beside him on the teleportation pad. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through him despite the gravity of their situation. "Whatever happens, Eric," she said softly, "I want you to know that I—" Her words were cut off as the teleportation sequence engaged, enveloping them in a shimmering field of energy. In a blink, they vanished from the safety of Astra's quarters, hurtling towards an uncertain confrontation on the bridge. As the world rematerialized around them, Eric and Astra found themselves in a dimly lit corridor just outside the bridge. The sound of raised voices and frantic activity filtered through the sealed doors. "Ready?" Eric whispered, his heart pounding in his chest. Astra nodded, her eyes gleaming with tenacity. "Together," she replied, as they prepared to face whatever challenges awaited them on the other side of those doors. Doors! With a shared nod, they burst into the bridge. The scene that greeted them was one of barely controlled chaos. Commander Lysara stood at the helm, barking orders to her loyalists as they scrambled to prepare the ship's weapon systems. The moment Astra and Eric entered, all eyes turned to them. "Ah, the princess and her pet," Lysara sneered, her hand hovering over a control panel. "Come to witness the end of your precious alliance?" Eric's mind raced as he assessed the situation. He knew he had to act fast to prevent catastrophe. Without hesitation, he lunged towards the nearest console, his fingers flying across the alien interface with newfound confidence. Astra, meanwhile, faced off against Lysara. "Stand down, Commander," she ordered, her voice ringing with authority. "This ends now." Lysera's response was a mirthless laugh as she launched herself at Astra, initiating a fierce hand-to-hand combat. The two Nigean women moved with incredible speed and precision, their fighting styles a testament to their advanced training. As the princess and the commander clashed, Eric worked feverishly to disable the ship's self-destruct mechanism. He could hear the sounds of battle behind him, but forced himself to focus on the task at hand. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he navigated through layers of Nigean security protocols. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the bridge. "Incoming missiles detected," a computerized voice announced. "Impact in 30 seconds. Eric's heart raced. He had to regain control of the critical systems before it was too late. With a final, desperate sequence of commands, he managed to bypass the last firewall. "Got it!" he shouted, immediately turning his attention to the defensive shields. As Eric worked to reactivate the shields, Astra and Lysera continued their deadly dance. The princess ducked under a vicious swipe from her opponent, retaliating with a swift kick that sent Lysera staggering back. 10 seconds to impact, the computer warned. Eric's fingers flew across the console, his eyes darting between the approaching missiles on the monitor and the shield controls. At the last possible moment, he slammed his hand down on the activation switch. The ship shuddered as the missile struck the newly raised shields. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the defenses might fail. Then gradually, the tremors subsided. Eric let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The Nigean crew members who had remained loyal to Astra looked at Eric with newfound respect. Their surprise at his mastery of their technology was evident in their wide-eyed stares. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Astra pressed her attack on Lysera. With a series of lightning-fast strikes, she disarmed the commander and pinned her to the ground. Lysera, realizing her defeat, reached for a small device on her belt. "You haven't won yet," she snarled, her finger poised over a button. Eric, anticipating her move, called out, "It won't work, Lysera. I've locked down all teleportation systems." The commander's face contorted with rage as she realized the futility of her last-ditch effort. Astra swiftly secured Lysera's hands behind her back, effectively ending the attempted coup. As if on cue, the bridge doors slid open once more. Captain Zara strode in, flanked by a contingent of Galactic Council representatives. She took in the scene before her, Eric at the helm, Astra restraining Lysera, and the loyal crew members standing at attention. "It seems we arrived just in time for the denouement," Zara observed dryly. She nodded to her security team, who moved to take custody of Lysera and her remaining supporters. One of the council representatives stepped forward, his gaze moving between Eric and Astra. "We witnessed your cooperation from our ship," he said, his tone a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Perhaps we were too hasty in our judgment of Earth and its potential." As the immediate crisis subsided, Eric found himself drawn to Astra. Their eyes met across the bridge, a current of unspoken emotions passing between them. Without a word, they slipped away from the commotion, finding a quiet corner of the ship. Once alone, the adrenaline of battle began to fade, replaced by a different kind of tension. Astra reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the side of Eric's face. "You were incredible," she murmured, her kaleidoscopic eyes shimmering with intensity. Eric leaned into her touch, his heart racing for an entirely new reason. "We make a good team," he replied, his voice low and husky. The distance between them seemed to evaporate as they drew closer, their shared ordeal and growing attraction culminating in a kiss that bridged the gap between their species. It was a moment of connection that transcended their physical differences, a union that represented a new chapter in human Nigean relations. As they eventually parted, both slightly breathless, Eric couldn't help but marvel at the turn of events. From pet to partner, he had found his place among the stars, and more importantly, with Astra. Back on the bridge, Captain Zara was deep in discussion with the council representatives. She glanced up as Eric and Astra returned, a knowing look in her eyes. "We were just discussing the possibility of establishing formal diplomatic relations with Earth," she informed them. "In fact, we believe an Earth-Nigean cultural exchange program might be in order." Eric and Astra exchanged glances, an unspoken agreement passing between them. They stepped forward, ready to embrace their new roles as ambassadors of peace between their worlds. The future stretched out before them, filled with challenges and opportunities, as Earth prepared to take its first tentative steps into the galactic community. Community. The future stretched out before them, filled with challenges and opportunities, as Earth prepared to take its first tentative steps into the galactic arena. In the days that followed, Eric and Astra found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of diplomatic activity. As they prepared for their return to Earth as ambassadors, the enormity of their task became increasingly apparent. Reports from the planet's surface painted a complex picture of humanity's reaction to the impending alliance. "Another protest in New York," Eric muttered, scrolling through news feeds on a holographic display. "And look at this. Sydney, London, Tokyo. It's happening everywhere." Astra leaned in, her kaleidoscopic eyes scanning the images of crowds holding signs with slogans like "Humans First" and "No to Alien Influence." She frowned, her brow furrowing with concern. "We knew this wouldn't be easy, but I hadn't anticipated such widespread resistance." Eric nodded grimly. "Fear of the unknown. It's a powerful force." Their conversation was interrupted by Captain Zara, who entered the room with a troubled expression. "I'm afraid I have more bad news," she announced. "A faction of conservative Nigans has been voicing their displeasure with recent events." Astra's eyes narrowed. "What kind of displeasure?" Zara's gaze flicked to Eric before returning to Astra. "They're particularly upset about your relationship with a lesser species. Some are calling for your removal from the diplomatic mission." Eric felt a surge of anger at the term lesser species, but he pushed it aside. Now wasn't the time for personal indignation. "What does this mean for our mission?" he asked. "For now, nothing," Zara replied. "The Galactic Council still supports your appointment as ambassadors, but be prepared for opposition from both sides." As the day of their descent to Earth approached, the tension aboard the Nigean flagship was palpable. Eric and Astra spent their final hours reviewing security protocols and rehearsing their initial statements. Finally, it was time. They boarded a sleek diplomatic shuttle, its hull gleaming with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift colors as it moved. Eric couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement despite the gravity of their situation. After all, how many humans had piloted an alien spacecraft? As they entered Earth's atmosphere, Eric marveled at the view of his home planet. The blue-green orb grew larger in the view screen, clouds swirling across its surface. Beside him, Astra watched with equal fascination, seeing Earth up close for the first time. Suddenly, a violent tremor rocked the shuttle. Warning alarms blared as the ship lurched to one side. "What was that?" Astra shouted over the din. Eric's hands flew over the controls, his mind racing to process the flood of information from the ship's sensors. "Some kind of energy weapon," he called back. "It's damaged our starboard engine." Through the view screen, they could see a smaller craft approaching rapidly. Its design was a crude fusion of human and Nigean technology. "Extremists," Astra growled, recognizing the threat immediately. She sprang from her seat, moving towards the rear of the shuttle. "Keep us in the air. I'll handle our uninvited guest." Eric nodded, focusing on rerouting power to maintain their flight path. He could hear the sounds of a scuffle behind him as Astra engaged the boarding party. The shuttle shuddered again as another blast struck its hull. Gritting his teeth, Eric executed a series of evasive maneuvers. He thanked whatever cosmic force was listening for the hours he'd spent in Nigean flight simulators. Without that training, they would have already plummeted from the sky. "How are we doing back there?" he called out, his eyes never leaving the controls. "Just fine," Astra replied, her voice strained but confident. There was a loud thump, followed by the sound of a body hitting the floor. "Though I don't think these gentlemen will be joining us for the landing." Despite the dire situation, Eric couldn't help but smile at her bravado. Together they had faced down a coup attempt on a Nigean battleship. A few human extremists were hardly going to stop them now. As they approached their landing site in Central Park, Eric could see the massive crowd that had gathered. News of their arrival and the attack had spread quickly. He guided the damaged shuttle down, the landing struts groaning under the stress as they touched down on the grass. For a moment all was silent. Then with a hiss of hydraulics, the shuttle's main hatch opened. Eric and Astra emerged, blinking in the bright sunlight. The assembled humans watched in tense silence, their expressions a mix of fear, curiosity, and awe-inspiring hostility. Eric knew this was a pivotal moment. Everything they had worked for, everything they hoped to achieve, hinged on what happened next. He took a deep breath, reaching for Astra's hand. As his fingers intertwined with hers, he felt a surge of confidence. He stepped forward, facing the crowd, ready to address his fellow humans and usher in a new era of interstellar cooperation. The fate of Earth's future in the galactic community hung in the balance, and Eric was determined to make his words count.
If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.